Dennis Kucinich, Ohio Democrat, introduces a war powers resolution designed to end U.S. involvement in Libya. Watch the debate here. NATO is extending its military campaign in Libya for another 90 days beginning June 27. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow.
Continue beyond 11:50 a.m. The chair recognizes a gentlewoman from California for 5 minutes. Ms. Chu.
You know what, let's do it the opposite way. Let's put this one here. Thank you. I rise today to announce an action to address an injustice carried out on this very floor that Congress has never atoned for, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. A century ago, the Chinese came here in search of a better life, but they faced harsh conditions, particularly in the halls of Congress. Congress passed numerous laws to restrict Chinese Americans, starting from the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, to stop the Chinese from immigrating, from becoming naturalized citizens, and from ever having the right to vote. These were the only such laws to target a specific ethnic group. The Chinese were the only residents that had to carry papers on them at all times. They were often harassed and detained. If they couldn't produce the proper documents, authorities threw them into prison or out of the country, regardless of their citizenship status. Political cartoons and hateful banners like these were hung in towns and cities and printed in papers. At the time of this hateful law, the Chinese were called racial slurs, were spat in the streets, and even brutally murdered. Only after China became an ally of the U.S. in World War II was this law repealed in 1943, 60 years after its passage. It has never been formally acknowledged by Congress as incompatible with America's founding principles. That is why, as the first Chinese American woman elected to Congress, and whose grandfather was a victim of this law, I stand on the very floor where the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed and announce that I have introduced a resolution calling for a formal acknowledgement and expression of regret for the Chinese exclusion laws. When the exclusion laws were first introduced, there was a great deal of debate in Congress over their merits. The U.S. had just abolished slavery. The 14th and 15th Amendment had recently been ratified. Slavery had been defeated, and freedom seemed more certain. The national atmosphere led many in Congress to stand up against the discriminatory anti-Chinese laws. But over the years, those standing for justice almost all disappeared. By the time 1882 came around, members of Congress were fighting over who deserved the most credit for getting the most discriminatory laws passed and standing against the Mongolian horde. Representative Albert Shelby Willis from Kentucky pushed relentlessly for the exclusion laws, lambasting the Chinese. Standing in the same spot where I am now, he said the Chinese were an invading race and called them aliens with sordid and un-Republican habits. He declared the U.S. was cursed with the evils of Chinese immigration and that they disturbed the peace and order of society. But there were a brave few, a small minority, who fought hard against prejudice and for principles of freedom. One such man was Senator George Frisbee Hoare, whose statue now stands proudly in the Capitol. He stood up to all of the Chinese exclusion laws and voted against each. He would say in 1904, when the laws were made permanent, "I cannot agree with the principle that this legislation or any legislation on the subject rests. All races, all colors, all nationalities contain persons entitled to be recognized everywhere as equals of other men. I am bound to record my protest if I stand alone." And stand alone he did. The final vote against the Chinese in the Senate was 76-1. What Senator Hoare stood up for is what I am asking Congress to stand up for today, that all people, no matter the color of their skin or the nation of origin, are the equals of every other man or woman. America came to be what it is today through immigrants who came from all corners of the world. Chinese immigrants were amongst them. They sought a place to live that was founded upon liberty and equality. They came in search of the American dream, that if you worked hard, you could build a good life. It is why my grandfather came to the United States. But when the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed, the truths that this nation holds as self-evident, that all are endowed with the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, were discounted by the very ones elected to uphold them. And so, for a generation of our ancestors like my grandfather, who were told for 6 decades by the U.S. government that the land of the free wasn't open to them, it is long past time that Congress officially and formally acknowledges these ugly laws that targeted Chinese immigrants and express sincere regret for these actions. With my resolution, Congress will acknowledge the injustice of the Chinese Exclusion Act, express regret for the lives it destroyed, and make sure that the prejudice that stained our nation is never repeated again. And it will demonstrate that today is a different day.
Time has expired.
And that we stand side by side for a stronger America.
Gentlewoman from California, Ms. Woolsey, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last week this body passed the National Defense Authorization Act. And in doing so, yet again, it put a stamp of approval on more violent, belligerent, and militaristic defense policy. While my friends in the majority continue to posture about federal spending, they're eager to authorize billions and billions on military programs and policies that don't actually make America safer. During last week's debate over the defense bill, they voted down an amendment that would have brought the Department of Defense funding levels down to the same 2008 levels they want to impose on domestic discretionary spending. Obviously, the Republicans believe in a blank check for the Pentagon, but austerity for everyone else. They rejected my amendment to eliminate the V-22 Osprey, a multi-billion-dollar aircraft with a performance and safety record so shoddy that even Dick Cheney tried to eliminate it when he was Secretary of Defense. They also rejected an amendment that would have prohibited the use of funds for permanent bases in Iraq and Afghanistan. This, despite the fact that an anonymous officer in Afghanistan was quoted in yesterday's Washington Post as saying that, and I quote him, he said, "We've become addicted to building." That officer added that supplemental appropriations with its billions of dollars for construction, and he said, have been like crack cocaine for the military. It gets worse, Mr. Speaker. The defense bill includes a radically expanded authorization for the use of military force. It completely undermines the War Powers Act, empowering the President, whichever President, whomever is in that office, to declare war regardless of whether an attack against the United States is imminent, regardless of whether our national security has been threatened. The language doesn't even specify any geographic limitation. The Republican majority couldn't even bring themselves to support an amendment that called simply for a plan within 60 days to transfer responsibility for Afghanistan's security to Afghanistan. A plan. So we can begin the process of redevelopment. Just a plan within 60 days. As our distinguished Democratic leader said here on the floor last week when we were debating this, who could be against that? Well, apparently the overwhelming majority of House Republicans could be against it, and are against it, and voted against it. Then they topped it off by voting to eliminate the modest public investment in the United States or the U.S. Institute of Peace, an institute that carries out real well-respected, life-saving work on peaceful conflict resolution around the world. Last night, the majority played a game of chicken with the global financial credibility of the United States, holding a vote on the debt ceiling that was designed to fail. I challenge them. You want meaningful spending cuts as a condition for a debt ceiling increase? Then stop giving the Pentagon unlimited use of the taxpayer's ATM card. Stop putting the full faith and credit of the United States on the line in order to wage more war. You believe in fiscal discipline and you think everything should be on the table? Then let's talk about saving $10 billion a month by ending the war in Afghanistan. And let's bring our troops home from Iraq and Afghanistan. With that, I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Capps, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to honor a constituent of mine from the 23rd District of California. His name is Mr. Jack Sutherland. Mr. Sutherland of Santa Maria, California, served honorably in the Coast Guard during World War II. He was stationed off the California coast. Mr. Sutherland's brave actions on December 25, 1943, resulted in the safe passage of 2 escort carriers down the Pacific, along the coast, and into San Diego Bay. I am very proud to represent Mr. Sutherland, an example to us all for his dedication to our country and for his lifetime of serving our community. Mr. Speaker, the debt we owe to our nation's veterans is immeasurable, and Mr. Sutherland is no exception. In fact, he's an example of those of that greatest generation who served nobly during the Second World War. His actions in 1943 leave me humbled and honored by his sacrifices. We can never repay his service, but we can act honorably on his behalf and behave in a way that is indicative of a grateful nation. Singling out events like these are important to remind us that acknowledging our veterans' bravery and sacrifice is never done. Despite the decades that have passed, our country remains indebted to the heroic actions of Mr. Sutherland and his many brothers-in-arms. It's also imperative to remember that we are still a nation at war, and that veterans who served decades ago or just months ago or are serving today deserve our support, our appreciation, and our profound gratitude. Mr. Sutherland waited too long to be officially recognized, and I'm sure he'd agree that all veterans deserve timely and genuine acknowledgments of their service. I'm proud of the work my staff completed to assist Mr. Sutherland achieve a formal recognition from the Commandant of the United States Coast Guard. Just a few days ago, the Veterans Clinic in Santa Maria, California, hosted a reception and a ceremony where the letter of recognition from the Commandant was read, and where many of the Coast Guard in active duty stationed at Morro Bay, California, were present to see someone of the generation preceding them be acknowledged. I consider my work on behalf of veterans to be one of my most sacred responsibilities as a member of Congress. Veterans like Mr. Sutherland represent the best this country has to offer, and ensuring his work is recognized is of paramount importance. It's an honor to represent a man of such integrity, conviction, and dedication to his country. I'm proud to include his service in the congressional record of the United States Congress, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Puerto Rico, Ms. Pierre Lalusi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The 2010 census confirmed that Hispanics are a growing part of the American family. There are now more than 50 million Latinos in the United States, accounting for more than half of the nation's population growth between 2000 and 2010. Today, 1 in 6 Americans is Hispanic. This tremendous growth adds to our country's rich diversity, but it also brings challenges. The number of English language learners in our nation's schools has increased by 50% over the past decade. English learners are found in states with traditionally large Hispanic populations, like Texas and New Mexico, and in states that have experienced a recent influx of immigrants, like Colorado and Indiana. And English learners are found in large numbers in the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico. How well our schools educate those students will determine the future success of our nation. And providing a quality education means ensuring that they graduate from high school with proficiency in English. The benefits of learning English are clear for students living in the 50 states where it is difficult to obtain most jobs without being fluent in the language. But learning English is also vital for students in Puerto Rico. In my life, I have visited many countries around the world, and everywhere I have traveled, I have seen young people studying English with passion and determination. Puerto Rico's sons and daughters, particularly as American citizens living in a U.S. territory, simply must be proficient in English to compete effectively in the modern, globalized world. Yet, for too many years, some politicians in Puerto Rico sought to limit the teaching of English in our local schools in a misguided effort to influence the debate over Puerto Rico's political status. This cynical approach has harmed our children and our island. Regardless of one's views on Puerto Rico's status, there can be no question that proficiency in English as well as in Spanish is in the best interest of Puerto Rico's youth. To deny our children the opportunity to learn English is to deny them the countless opportunities that come with being bilingual. Accordingly, since arriving in Congress, one of my primary goals has been to improve English language instruction in Puerto Rico schools. That is why I have introduced a bill to raise a cap that restricts the amount of federal funds the island can receive to strengthen its English language programs. In order to ensure that the children of Puerto Rico have the same opportunities as children in the States, it is imperative that the island be treated fairly when it comes to allocating federal funding for English language programs. Moreover, our schools' success in teaching English learners in Puerto Rico and in the States will depend on the number of well-prepared bilingual teachers available to instruct the students. In Puerto Rico, the challenge has been to find enough teachers who are sufficiently proficient in English to effectively teach the language. At the same time, the increased number of English learners in the States has left school districts scrambling to find enough teachers who are fluent in foreign languages such as Spanish and Mandarin, as well as in English. In both cases, schools are asking themselves, how can I find an experienced teacher to meet this need? One answer, teacher exchanges. I recently introduced legislation that would fund teacher exchanges between school districts in different regions of the United States. Under my bill, for example, a teacher in Puerto Rico could improve her English ability by spending a year in the States trading places with a native English-speaking instructor who seeks to improve her Spanish language skills. Through this exchange, the teachers and, more importantly, the students in each community would benefit. No wonder that organizations representing English teachers, foreign language instructors, principals, and school boards have all endorsed my bill. As Congress works to reform the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, I urge my colleagues to address the needs of English language learners, whether those students are located in Santa Fe, San Antonio, or San Juan. Our goal should be as simple as it is ambitious, to ensure that every student in our nation has the opportunity to graduate from high school as a fluent English speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. DeFazio, for 5 minutes.
Well, yesterday the House resoundingly rejected a so-called clean increase in the debt limit, as it should have. But different people are going to draw different conclusions from this vote. The Republicans will say this means unlimited spending cuts. That's how we'll balance the budget. And on my side of the aisle, there'll be those who say, no, this puts revenues back into play. Actually, both should be right. There is no way to deal with a $1.7 trillion, I guess we're down to $1.4 trillion this year. Money's coming in a little better than expected. To deal with that without dealing with both sides of the equation. That is revenues and cuts in spending. Now, unfortunately, around here, it seems that coming together for the problems of the nation is somewhat quaint and old-fashioned. I've been here long enough to remember when we used to do those things, when we had the surtax on millionaires back when Bush the First was president, and brought back some fiscal sanity. Before my time, when Ronald Reagan raised taxes 3 times because he realized that supply-side economics didn't work. Well, we're now back to supply-side economics over here. Doesn't work, and more tax cuts. They're proposing more tax cuts in the face of deficits. Absurd. So how are we going to force that discussion? I believe we need a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. We actually passed one when I was here in 1995. I voted for it. It failed by 1 vote in the Senate. Now just think, had that been in place when in the last 2 years of the Clinton presidency, we not only balanced the budget, we began to pay down debt for the first time since 1969. Then came Bush 2, and he said, we're going to give that money back to the people. And even when we went into deficit, he said, well, we need more tax cuts. That's what we need is more tax cuts because we're running a deficit now, and that's how you deal with deficits is to cut taxes because then people will whatever. Somehow that creates more money. If we had had the balanced budget amendment to the Constitution in place, Bush couldn't have gotten away with that. He couldn't have launched an unnecessary war in Iraq and cut taxes at the same time. The first time our nation has gone to war while cutting taxes. And he managed to double the debt in 8 short years, ending with the spectacular crash on Wall Street and the TARP bailout, which many forget was the Bush TARP bailout. I voted against that, too, not the Obama TARP bailout, although Obama continued those same Wall Street-friendly policies to his discredit. And then the Obama stimulus. 40% of that was Bush tax cuts. What is it? What is it we don't get that cutting taxes in the way that George Bush wanted to do and did do with trickle-down economics and piling up more debt does not put people back to work. It's not investment. It doesn't generate economic activity and jobs. The theory is, oh, the rich people will have so much money they'll invest it in meaningful ways. Corporations are sitting on $2 trillion of cash. Wall Street billionaire hedge fund managers pay a 15% rate of tax, half that of an Army captain. Are they investing in a meaningful way to put people back to work? No, they're speculating and driving up the price of gas and screwing the American people and depressing our economy. It's time to get real around here, and I believe a balanced budget amendment would focus the minds and deal with this deficit and debt in a way that is serious, both with dealing with revenues and dealing with spending cuts. I voted extending all the Bush tax cuts in December, not just the ones on the rich people, all of them. A little bit of shared sacrifice. That would have cut the deficit in half by $5 trillion over 10 years. Then we wouldn't have been screaming in January after everybody, many people on that side of the aisle voted for extending the Bush tax cuts. They were shocked that we had a record deficit this year. Huh? You just voted to reduce revenues by $400 billion, and you're shocked that that increased the deficit? And has it been putting people back to work? Not much that I've seen in my district, I'll tell you that. Come the Ryan budget. Serious budget. Destroys Medicare, ends Medicare as we know it. Cuts Medicaid. Most people just think that's for poor people. Well, actually, most of the money goes to either kids or seniors in nursing homes. So that's going to be kind of a tough one. So huge, devastating cuts. More tax cuts, more of the joke economic policies. Let's cut taxes, and that'll help us deal with the deficit. More tax cuts for rich people and big corporations. And he doesn't balance the budget even under his rosy scenario written by the Heritage Foundation until 2040. That's a serious attempt at dealing with our debt and deficit. That's the Ryan budget. The Obama budget's even worse. Don't know if it gets there by 2050. Neither side is dealing seriously with these issues. We need to focus people's minds, and a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution is the best way to do that.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, for 5 minutes.
I thank the Speaker very much, and I thank my colleagues and ask to address the House for 5 minutes. It's important to be able to discuss with my colleagues just what we're doing in this House and what is considered important and urgent And what is the impact on what we're doing? As my friends, the Republicans on the other side of the aisle, are now spending time with the President, I hope they will have visions of President Ronald Reagan. Because in 1983, Ronald Reagan begged and asked the Congress at that time to raise the debt limit. This is not a 2011, 21st century phenomenon, never to be heard of in the history of this country. Raising the debt limit, my friends, is not evil or sin. It is an actuality that requires us to be responsible adults. I want you to eye this picture and to continue to keep your eyes on it continuously as I explain to you what we are doing when we ask for the debt limit to be raised. Does anyone care about our men and women on the front lines? Do we care about their families? Do we care about veterans? Oh, we wave the flag, and many of us emotionally were drawn to commemorate and honor those who had fallen this past Monday. We interrelated with families, some of whom came up to me and asked me why veterans are discriminated against and can't get work, or disabled veterans are chastised by their employer. And I made a commitment to them that we'll work to have jobs and end the discrimination. And that the soldiers who are coming back, 10% unemployment. Do you realize that? That there is a 10% unemployment among Iraq and Afghanistan returning soldiers. Soldiers who are in their 20s and 30s or maybe 40s. Soldiers who may be disabled, who may have come back from a catastrophic injury, but they want to work and support their family. These very men and women, do you know what the debt limit not being lifted will do? And so, yes, this was put on the floor of the House to make mockery and a joke. But I came here to be a serious legislator, and I voted yes because it was a serious statement on behalf of my constituents and the American people, and I could not, within 24 hours of being around military families, abandon them with the frivolity and the foolishness of putting something up on the floor just to put it in the eye of the President. Let me tell you why it partly was done as a trickery. Listen to the words of a bond dealer. I didn't even know they had a vote tonight, to be honest with you. A senior government bond strategist at CRT Capital Group in Stamford, Connecticut said, the only real event that the market is focused on is the point at which they run out of money and have to shut down the government. Well, let me tell you, the reason why this was just a joke, except those of us who voted yes didn't take it as a joke, because the Secretary of the Treasury has extended the time to August 2nd. But if we do not raise the debt limit like Ronald Reagan asked and other Republican presidents asked with no fanfare, let me tell you what will happen to our soldiers. It'll be 20% unemployment. What will happen to Medicare? We won't be making it solvent. We'll just end it and implode it like the Ryan budget wants to do. We'll eliminate Medicare for disabled persons and children and seniors in nursing homes. No, we won't have any veterans benefit. But our cities that now are grappling with disaster, that funding will dry up as well. And we are the rainy day umbrella for the American people. But you know what else? Summer jobs for our young people who are struggling to get themselves back in school in the fall. In the city of Houston, how, I don't know, unthinking can you be when you close down city pools? The meager opportunity and recreation that a child has in an inner city area or maybe a rural area. Summer pools totally closed down. So I guess what they're supposed, and parks. So what they're supposed to do, besides having one person that can monitor the pool, you just have them running the streets. What sense does that make? Or the school districts in the state of Texas now losing $4 billion. HISD, the Houston Independent School District, one of the largest in the nation, $200 million. Or AISD, $30 million. It's time to wake up and understand that we must recognize the responsibility we have, Mr. Speaker. We can end the war in Afghanistan, bring them home from Iraq, and we can do our job and raise the debt ceiling This is ridiculous, but I'm not going to be part of it. I yield
The
back.
chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stearns, for 5 minutes.
Yes, unanimous consent to revise and extend.
Without objection.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Lost in the hyperbolic statements and calls of doom, if Congress does not raise the current debt ceiling, is the real problem that our nation faces, the out-of-control spending that has become epidemic here in Congress. No doubt a technical default in August surely would be problematic, but much worse would be the results if Republicans cave to Democrats and no significant spending reforms is implemented. Today, my colleagues, 68 cents of every dollar is spent on entitlement programs. By the year 2025, the government will spend 100% of every dollar on revenues on entitlements. The United States is over $14 trillion in debt, and without spending cuts in the deficit, and our national debt will continue to grow. We must begin to rein in spending and bring about the fiscal changes to protect our children from this growing burden of debt. Mr. Speaker, importantly, markets understand the difference between a technical default, in which investors may have to wait a short period of time for an interest payment, and the difference with an actual default in which a country is unable to repay its debt. If Congress does not act appropriately now, very soon the country will not face merely a technical default, but instead a real default. Then the calls of doom will be appropriate. Investors have every incentive to want Congress to balance its budget and get its house in order finally. If this means investors will have to wait a few days for an interest payment to be repaid, then so be it. Because fixing the real problem now guarantees to investors that this government can make its payments 10 years from now, a realization that will comfort investors much more than preventing a mild delay, particularly if that mild delay means future delays, future debt limit debates, and future possible defaults. Of course, the best solution, is no default at all, not technical and not actual. Congress must quickly come together and make some tough decisions that will forever affect the future of our country. But we will not be coerced into a position that fuels a spending addiction that has landed us in this situation to where we stand today. We will not succumb to a vote to increase the debt limit if we are not compensated with significant spending cuts. As our Speaker, John Boehner, has said, quote, "It's true that allowing America to default would be irresponsible, but it would be more irresponsible to raise the debt ceiling without simultaneously taking dramatic steps to reduce spending and reform the budget process itself," end quote. And it can be done. We can look back to understand what will happen next. Several years back, Russia had a real default, yet within 2 or 3 years they reached all-time low interest rates. Earlier this year, the House passed the House Budget Resolution for fiscal year 2012, which set non-security discretionary spending to below 2008 funding levels. It calls upon repealing the costly and burdensome health care law and envisions reforming some entitlement programs to contain costs and pay down the national budget. My colleagues across the aisle have criticized portions of this legislation, but the question is asked, where is their alternative? There can be no debate if the other side cannot produce a logical document that seriously sets out to solve our nation's crisis, the real crisis. Just like the solution to a drug addiction is not to increase one's intake, the solution to our nation's spending addiction is not to increase one's capacity to continue to accumulate debt. The time is now for real reform. Only after we have curbed the trillions of dollars of debt that we continue to pile up can we then consider raising the debt limit.
Gentleman's time has expired. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until noon today.
So the House returns at noon Eastern today to begin work on Homeland Security Department spending for the